Officials are at their wits' end, waiting on Jamaica to implement the agreed tariff reductions under the EPA. It's now up to the Portia Simpson Miller-led administration to articulate Jamaica's position to the EU on the issue. Reporting from Brussels, Belgium for CVM News, I'm Keneal Gale.
All right, thanks, Keneal. And there's more news from Europe because the European Union will be allocating more money to fight the transatlantic drug trade. The EU says Jamaica will be one of several Caribbean countries to benefit from an additional 10 million euros to strengthen national security. Here again, Keneal Gale.
For decades, the Caribbean has been a major transshipment point for drugs from South America destined for North America, with drug trafficking being linked to increased homicide rates in the Caribbean and Europe. The European Union is increasing its efforts to fight the illicit trade.
There is a recognition globally and in Europe and in the Caribbean that the challenge of drugs is a very important one, and it is one that affects all the regions in the world, and that combating the problems related to drugs, whether it is drugs themselves or the violence that sometimes accompanies drugs or other forms of crime, is a shared responsibility.
The EU official noted that increased drug trafficking meant more money for criminals to fund their operations. John Caligaros pointed out that this posed a serious threat not only to the Caribbean, but also to Europe, and that's one reason more monetary support will be given to secure the region. He said a program valued at some 10 million euros is now being designed to address security issues in the Caribbean.
The area of security and crime is part of the new strategy that we're working on with the Caribbean, the joint strategy, where we have jointly charted things that we'd like to do together in many sectors, and that is one of them. And we are currently working on a regional program to try and support the Caribbean in this sector.
The head of the Caribbean division at the European External Action Service added that the EU's budgetary support to crime reduction through justice reform and capacity building within national security will be sustained and in some instances strengthened. The other intervention program being pursued by Brussels is aimed at youths at risk in order to reduce the demand for drugs in the region. Reporting from Belgium for CVM News, I'm Keneal Gale.
A CVM exclusive now, millions of euros in grant funding from Europe intended for the Consolidated Fund has not reached there because Jamaica has not satisfied certain criteria. Keneal Gale is in the heart of the European Union, Belgium, where officials have been telling him what targets the government has missed.
Developmental aid is one of the European Union's biggest contributions to emerging economies. It's the organization's way of helping middle-income countries such as Jamaica combat some of its biggest problems. Since 2002, the EU has given Jamaica billions of dollars in aid money, with 85% of that going directly to budget support, until recently. Between 2007 and 2010, the EU aid disbursement to Jamaica through the delegation in Kingston increased exponentially, more than doubling over the period. However, the aid graph took a nosedive in 2011 as the country could only access about 14% of what it did the year before. EU sources in Brussels have confirmed to CVM News that about 80 million euros in aid money could not be disbursed to Jamaica in the form of budget support between late 2010 and 2011 because several conditionalities were not met. Here's how budget support works. When the EU earmarks aid money for a country, a portion of the sum goes to the government's consolidated fund to support the implementation of fiscal, social, and infrastructural programs. When that happens, the EU has little or no say in how the money is spent. However, Jamaica has failed to live up to several of the benchmarks it devised and agreed to when signing the deal. Some of the sticking points are believed to be Jamaica's failure to implement pension and public sector reforms. The fact that Jamaica is yet to ink a successor agreement to the IMF standby agreement, which ended in May, and with several questions still surrounding how that agreement stalled, have also prevented Brussels from channeling aid money through the Consolidated Fund. The result, the European Union is reallocating some of the money pledged for budget support to fund other programs on the island, which means the government will have less say in how the money that was once meant for the consolidated fund is spent. An EU source in Brussels points out that half of the 80 million euros earmarked for budget support last year, which the government failed to qualify for, will be reallocated to other projects. This, EU officials claim, proves that the organization is willing to work with Jamaica, although the government continues to miss its own targets. However, many critics see it differently, arguing that this is another sign of Kingston's failure to impress international partners that it is capable of managing its own fiscal affairs. Reporting from Europe for CDM News, I'm Kenil Gale.
Another CVM exclusive now from Belgium. After marathon negotiations over the past 2 days, European Union leaders have agreed on a plan to save the continent's economy. But is the plan adequate, and what does it mean for Jamaica? Kenil Gale sought some answers.
After hours of tough negotiations at the European Commission's summit here in Brussels, Europe's most powerful leaders announced early Friday morning that a decision had been reached. The financial markets watched keenly as EU leaders explained a plan that they say should stimulate growth and avert a financial crisis in Europe. The EU leaders oozed with confidence as they assured the world that they got it right this time around. However, economist at the Secretariat of the Organization of Africa, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States, Obadiah Malafia, says he doesn't think the leaders went far enough in order to totally avoid the crisis.
We are happy that they have reached some sort of understanding. But if you ask me as a professional economist, I think these are interim measures, and I don't think that the agreement is enough to deal with the deepest crisis.
A European financial meltdown could have severe repercussions on the economies of smaller countries such as Jamaica. Because of this, the economist at the ACP says that Jamaica and other countries in the region should still pay close attention to the financial situation in Europe, as the Eurozone economy is not out of the woods just yet. As part of its thrust to stimulate growth, EU leaders also agreed to pump some 120 billion euros into creating jobs in the most vulnerable member states. This, Obadiah Malafia argues, is a good move, as it will mean Europeans will have more to spend, which in turn will benefit smaller nations such as Jamaica that depend on the strength of the European economy.
The restoration of confidence within the European economic space is vital, I think, to relaunching the foundations of global growth. And of course, if that relaunching is successful, the ACP countries obviously will be better off, because then we have a more prosperous market to where we can export our goods.
For now, Jamaica and other middle-income states can breathe a little easier, as Europe is believed to have dodged another financial bullet. But after being on the brink so many times, some skeptics believe that another flirt with financial danger for the continent is not far away. Reporting from Brussels, Belgium for CVM News, I'm Kenil Gale.